hopefully the connection's good and you guys can hear me all right. So, yeah, so my name's Evan Wills. I'm a biologist based out at the DEC's Reynolds Game Farm located in Ithaca, and so I'm also the manager of the facility here, and at our location is where we produce all of the pheasants for release across the state for our hunting seasons and sponsored pheasant hunts and all that. And kind of personal notes, I consider myself, a jack of all, master of none when it comes to the outdoors. I do hunting, fishing, trapping, but with my main interests really in small game hunting and trapping. So my role here with the pheasant propagation program just really kind of ties well into my kind of personal interests. So I'm going to take the next few minutes and give you all just kind of a brief overview of the pheasant propagation program. There's been a lot of, I think, misconceptions about it over the years, and, we've also been in kind of a period of heavy development. We experienced the avian influenza outbreak at our facility a couple of years back, and that took, that led us to take kind of a really good hard look at our program and make sure that we're getting the most that we can out of it, and that also our hunters are getting the most they can. So, again, I'm just going to run through and give you kind of a brief history, where it's been, where it's going, and, again, feel free to pop questions in there if anybody has them. I'll do my best to answer when I can. So, I think the biggest thing with pheasants is, you get a lot that, well, they are the Chinese ringneck pheasant. So they were first introduced from Asia in the late 1890s, but, there's a lot of confusion, too, that sometimes assume that since they are not from America originally, that they are an invasive species, but that's certainly not the case. If they were an invasive, we wouldn't necessarily need the propagation program. So they were, as I said, first introduced in New York in the 1890s in eastern Long Island, and it was pretty soon after that there were some other releases that happened throughout the state, and they really took off in popularity as a game bird within the state, and just due to that incredible plumage on the males, very fast flight, so they made for kind of a fun sporting bird out there. And then, of course, obviously, they've got some very high quality table fare. So, as this popularity kind of took off, so did their populations in the state, and so it was only about 20 years after that we had, oops, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So populations kind of, took well to New York's landscape, which at the time was comprised of minimal woodlands. That was due to a lot of the kind of deforestation throughout the state post-European settlement. The agriculture that was going on at the time was very favorable towards pheasants, a lot of small-scale ag with small grains. And then there was also some very heavily depressed predator populations. So kind of back through that time period, almost everything was considered vermin and eliminated off the landscape. But so about 20 years after their first introduction, we were able to kind of have the first declared season by our conservation department. And so even at that time when populations were strong enough that they said, hey, we're going to have a season on this, it was only a year after that they initiated the first state-owned propagation facility, which was in Sherburne, New York. And that facility is still there, but it operates as kind of it's the Rogers Environmental Ed Center, and then there's also a DEC field office located there as well. And so again, throughout a lot of the 20th century when we had these strong populations, there's still a lot of propagation that was still going on. So the state had as many as 7 different game farms throughout the state: Long Island, Brownville, Western New York, out by Basum, that was the John White Game Farm. And then in 1927 was the Reynolds Game Farm, which is still in production today. So, now all this while, you can even look back on past annual conservation reports, and it was still quite often noted that, stocking was kind of done to help out some of those populations, but again, even during those times of high wild birds, it was still quoted as for the gun. And so, you know, one of the biggest misconceptions with the propagation program is that birds are going out there and released for the reestablishment of wild populations. And so even as far back as, you know, mid and early 20th century, it was still being done to just have supplemental game on the landscape for harvest in the fall and for opportunity. And then we saw through the, you know, populations peaked once they hit into the late 60s, and there was a lot that kind of went on that made things really good for pheasants, and then things started to kind of turn and became a little bit less favorable for them. So they started to lose a lot of habitat through suburban sprawl, shifts in agriculture, kind of post-World War II is when we start to see some things in that kind of change. And habitat, again, you're going to hear me mention that a lot. Habitat is just such a driving factor for birds and a lot of other species. And so some of the big things that benefit pheasants are some different, like, ag programs that work to preserve habitat. And so back through the 50s, 60s, early 70s, there was this crop diversion and soil bank program, kind of an early predecessor to our modern day CRP, Conservation Reserve Program. And so that really did away with a lot of this kind of reserve land that was held and benefiting grassland species. So, and then again, once habitat becomes less than ideal, then we're going to see an increase in predation because those birds are no longer a proverbial needle in a haystack. But it was in late 1970s that the state, you know, had their first pheasant management plan, and within that, it was even addressed at that point that, hey, despite all these efforts, the writing's on the wall. Stocking isn't necessarily going to play a major role in reestablishing populations, and so in that original plan back in 1979, it was even stated that stocking efforts were going to be for put and take management. And over the years, you know, a lot of different efforts were tried to get that resurgence in the wild birds that were out there in New York. Through the early 2000s, we had the Landowner Incentive Program, and that was a program designed to incentivize landowners to leave some habitat that would benefit pheasants and other grassland species. And unfortunately, when it comes to land use, a lot of times money talks if there's more value in, you know, selling that in a private market, or, you know, if crops are in higher demand that year. And so these two graphs here, I think, also really highlight some important factors behind New York's wild pheasant population, or I guess kind of lack thereof in modern times. So on the left, we've got the CRP enrollment last year. And so you can kind of see by all those green dots and the concentration of green dots, landowners that are enrolled in that CRP program that, again, is set up to preserve habitat, create buffer zones, you know, and avoid kind of just big stripped out usage of the land. In areas where we have that highest participation, that's where we always have our strong pheasant numbers. So, you know, we look out to the Midwest, to the Dakotas and all that. And CRP participation, unfortunately, just isn't really that strong in New York. There's a couple different driving factors to that. But, and then again, coupled with the fact that, again, I said at the earlier stages of wild populations, you know, there was a lot of kind of deforested area. And so as New York State kind of reverts back to that forested state, we see a, you know, kind of decrease in those species such as pheasant and, you know, perhaps some of our young forest species, and that's what has, you know, really spurred some of that young forest initiative. And so, again, that kind of increase in timbered land isn't going to bode well for pheasants. But, you know, again, as I said, pheasant propagation has always kind of been there as kind of a backbone of pheasant hunting and pheasant harvest. And recent surveys have us at about 25 to 30,000 pheasant hunters across the state. And, you know, we do get sightings of birds outside of like our pheasant season, and if you go on to sites like eBird, there will be sightings of pheasants, but a lot of those really just end up being holdover from prior stockings, and there are certainly very isolated reports of, you know, pheasants that maybe even do have a chance to reproduce, but it's not on that kind of grand scale that we might like to see. So we had most recently done a survey with pheasant hunters and just kind of looking at some of their information in regards to how they were satisfied with the program, what they would like to see. And so with that, we were also looking at both our active pheasant hunters and lapsed pheasant hunters, so folks that had never had or hadn't in a while. And so one kind of interesting piece of information out of that was that we had 62% of all surveyed hunters had or do currently pheasant hunt. So that is kind of a pretty important rate of hunters out there that either had or do participate in pheasant hunting. So with that, you know, as I said, we wanted to kind of take a look at this program and give it a little bit more strategy and a little bit more purpose than in the past where, hey, we were just raising X amount of birds, tossing them out on the landscape on these hunting sites, and that was about where the management of the stocked pheasants ended. And there's been, you know, a lot of interest in developing and learning more about R3 efforts and bettering R3 efforts. And R3 is just a shorthand term for the recruitment of of new hunters, the retention of those hunters that we currently have, how do we keep them engaged, and the reactivation of lapsed hunters. So we want to, you know, again, take kind of a look back at our program, a self-look, and see how can we better tailor what we're doing to address these three groups of outdoors folks. So when it comes to our new hunters, we want them to go from that stage of interest to then becoming that vested hunter, you know, and being able to go out hunt independently on their own. And there's quite a few barriers for those new folks. A lot of our hunters, there was one study that I saw that was like 37% of new interested hunters that take a hunter education course, they end up not even becoming established hunters. And so we want to kind of identify what that break is that prevents them from going to the next step. And so a lot of the reasoning behind that is a lack of property for them to access. They don't know where to hunt. They feel like they don't have a place to hunt. A lot of them don't have the social support. So us that were perhaps raised in a hunting family, you kind of take that for granted that you just kind of grew up knowing how to hunt and get out there. And then, again, without that kind of social support to guide them and teach them, it also results in a lack of confidence that they can go out there and hunt on their own. So a lot of our new hunters, they want to hunt, but they take the course. They didn't, you know, okay, it teaches you the basics, but they're looking for a little bit more of that hands-on opportunity. And so with pheasant stocking, we can kind of use this and our propagation program to really kind of target some of those barriers. And so all of our release sites that we're putting birds out on each fall is, you know, a public access site, and the main purpose is to get people out there, get them engaged in the outdoors, get them to enjoy hunting, and become an established hunter. And so we can take a look at our release sites, and again, historically, it was just kind of like, hey, we got whatever sites we could, but now we can look at our, you know, density of hunter densities in relation to population centers, you know, and kind of use that to look through and identify gaps and see, hey, maybe we need to put a little bit more focus and find a site over here. So another program that we offer is the sponsored pheasant hunt program, and this is one that we, you know, really want to promote and make sure that as many folks are aware of it, that can participate, that want to assist with it. And with this program, we have volunteers all around the state that hold these publicly accessible, no-charge hunts that are kind of geared towards our new and underrepresented hunters. And so we provide the pheasants to them based on number of registrants, and they put an application through us to make sure that hunt is, kind of shooting for that correct message that we're aiming to spread. And so again, these events are really kind of that really awesome next step from that hunter education course where, okay, you're getting the basics, you're getting that says, hey, you're now legally allowed to hunt. All right, but then these sponsored pheasant hunts give a chance for these experienced hunters to take folks out and kind of show them that next phase in firearm handling and just kind of hunter, ethics in the field. And, it's a great way to kind of bridge from that one step to the other. And they've been highly successful, and we've really gotten some positive reviews on it. So we're really looking to continue that, expand that. In that map here, that's of hunts that happened last year. We had over 50 hunts across the state, took place in 24 different counties. And again, we're looking to increase that as much as we can. And so anybody that's listening or that knows anybody that, thinks could be of a benefit to attend one of these hunts, I've got the QR code there, as well as the website that they're listed at. And alternatively, too, if you're a seasoned hunter and you think it's important to kind of get that next generation or that next phase of hunters out there, and you want to hold one of these sponsored pheasant hunts, we've got the webpage there where you can get an application, or you can always reach out with any questions on what quite is entailed in holding a sponsored hunt. We always work with folks and with new hunt coordinators to kind of work them through the steps in the process and what it might look like. And so all these hunts are posted on our Huntfish NY event page, which is at register-ed.com, and that webpage will show up in just a second. And so this page is something that was launched last year that goes beyond the sponsored pheasant hunt program and really provides an opportunity for people to get on and find out what's happening, what they can get involved in relation to hunting and fishing in the outdoors. And so last year we had over 76 events that, mentored hunts for different species, not just pheasants. So, turkey, goose, whitetail, introductory classes, people, again, looking to learn that next step in their hunter education, and some festivals and outreach events. And so this has been very popular, and it's a great resource that we want to just make sure that we continue to promote and get out there so that people are informed and at least know where to go if they do want to look for these opportunities. And so this is what the page looks like here. And so, again, it's just www.register-ed.com, and then that'll take you to the landing page. Or, again, that QR code that I had up a couple slides ago as well will get you there. So a lot of that's for our new hunters, but we also want to make sure that we are retaining those current hunters that we have and make sure that they're continuing to have a positive experience when they go out pheasant hunting and that they're going to continue to be established hunters. And so the best way to kind of find out information with that is through surveying. And again, it comes down to folks responding to surveys and providing us the data and insight that we need, whether it's on pheasant hunting satisfaction or, again, kind of those rare samples of, trail cam surveys, fur bearer sightings, all that. It's just great opportunities for citizen science and for folks out there for their voices to be heard. So what was important to current hunters was really that they wanted to be sure that they wanted to feel like there was going to be a chance of success. And so they wanted a chance to hear and see pheasants. And besides that, important factors to them were site availability, that they had a spot to go pheasant hunting, that they felt was going to have pheasants and have a chance. And so with that, they also felt that, more pheasants released then obviously would probably result in an increase in that satisfaction. So we've increased our annual allocation of released birds to up over 40,000 pheasants a year, where we were at about 30,000, and additional stockings. So historically, stockings were done the first few weeks of the season, and then that was about it. But last year, we implemented the first of some late-season stockings that were met with huge success. People seem to really enjoy them, so the plan is to continue those and even grow upon it where we can. As I said, getting more birds out on the landscape. So we have between our annual fall release of adult pheasants of about 40,000, 42,000. We then also have 10,000 birds that are put out on the landscape through the day-old chick program. So that's a program where people can receive day-old chicks free of charge from us, and they're going to raise them to at least 12 weeks of age and then release them out on public hunting grounds as well. So again, we distributed about 10,000 chicks for that purpose. And then site availability, we've got over 100 sites all across the state. We've got a new interactive mapper that is on there. And the interactive mapper is really a great source to find out, hey, right where birds are. We give a range of when they're going out, and also a quantity, because a lot of concern from folks is, you know, hey, our bird's going to get put out here, and that gives us provides them with the information to know. And so then lastly, so we've looked at, recruiting new hunters, retaining the current ones, and then what does it take to get some of those lapsed hunters in, and why did they drop out in the first place? And so historically, with this survey, reasons for that was they felt they just had a poor chance of success, and on top of some crowding, poor site quality, not knowing where to hunt, having to travel too long to hunt. So the ways that we're going to look into that and are planning on addressing that is we've had some regions that are starting to address some of the crowding issues by closing on stocking days. And we've, again, just going back to that whole assessment of stocking sites, we want to keep the ones that we are finding the best quality, and maybe one before, hey, if it was rather small and not really overall valuable, that one might not be worth retaining. And again, that development of the interactive mapper, as we know, these lapsed hunters didn't know where to hunt. And so that interactive mapper is just getting the information out there to folks so that they know where to go and what to expect. So, through all this, what does the future of the pheasant propagation program look like? And, I think it's safe to say that, we're on the cusp of our new pheasant management plan and really kind of getting all that we can out of our pheasant propagation program. Like I said, it's kind of that turn of just the old methodology of just putting birds out, dropping them on the landscape, and calling it quits there. But really kind of creating and focusing on a purposeful use of this propagation program, getting the most value out of it, the most rewards for the inputs in terms of making sure that folks are continuing to, be upland game bird hunters, small game hunters, and even just getting them out in the field and out into the woods. So with that, if anybody on here is a current pheasant hunter, good luck this season. We're right around the corner from it. If anybody out there is thinking about becoming a pheasant hunter or wants to give it a try, go check out that webpage with the hunts listed. See if there's one in your area. There most likely is. And see what it's all about. And again, if you're a lapsed hunter, hey, we've made changes to the program. We're going to continue to better the program. So if you haven't in a while, pick it up again and head out there. So I thank you all for taking the time to sit with me and listen tonight. And again, if any questions pop up, I'm more than happy to answer them.